There's none in there.
Is it maybe some books?
This is 79, and then there's a book.
Meeting's out today.
Good morning, FHS. Today is Friday, February 23rd, 2024. Would you please join me in a minute of silence? Please stand if you are able and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and have a great day.
All right, guys, good morning. Got a pretty light class period today. I think I might have mentioned, I don't remember, but usually we just spent one class period on section 1.9. So most years we do the book assignment and this practice quiz that you guys picked up in one class period and then quiz it the second day. But Ms. Thomas, the other pre-calculus teacher, did the planning for this unit, and I don't know why, because I haven't had a chance to ask her, but she gave us 2 days for section 1.9. So I guess it's going to be a little bit boring, so I apologize for that, but it should be pretty easy here. So what I need you guys to do is go ahead and number your handout as 87. And since this is short enough, I'm going to give you guys about 30 minutes to just try it as a practice quiz, no calculator, to see how you do. And then after 30 minutes, I'll go over the whole thing. And then that can kind of help you figure out what it is you might need to look over again before our quiz. I would also add that our quiz is next class. So you've got a weekend in between now and then, so you might set some kind of alert to remind yourself. Even if you just look over your stuff for 2 minutes, it's better than nothing. And I would like you guys to turn in the book assignment 86. So for my other classes, I will expect them to have that turned in at the start of class because I told them differently. I didn't realize how quickly that would go last class until I saw y'all do it. So if you don't have it ready to turn in at the start of class, that's okay. Just make sure I get the book assignment 86 in Google Classroom before you leave today. So since I didn't warn y'all that I was expecting it to be done. William? A-Day. Okay, so again, make sure I've got the book assignment at least by the end of class. If you have it finished, please just go ahead and turn it in because I'm going to start grading the ones I have. Set a reminder about the quiz next class, and then 30 minutes from now, please be finished with 87 so that when I go over it, you can see if you did it correctly or not. And then after that, you can have the rest of class to work on something else for your other classes. 8 more minutes, and then I'll go over it. So I believe on the class website I did have the answers up. So if you took it upon yourself to check your answers that way, and you know which ones you need to pay attention to, that's fine. But if you didn't, you should probably pay attention to all of it. All right, so question 1. If you were given these specific points, you should be able to give some specific points on the inverse. So all you have to know for this is that inverse means you're swapping x and y. So -9, 4 becomes 4, -9. -6, 3 would be 3, -6 on the inverse. -3, 2 on the function would become 2, -3 on its inverse. Switch x and y. Switch x and y. Switch x and y. I don't know why there's so many points, but gets the point across. That's all it means to be inverse. Swapping input with output. So x becomes y, y becomes x. Generally, students do a good job with this, but occasionally there'll be a student or two that makes things negative. It has nothing to do about changing the sign. It just has to do with swapping the input with the output. All right, question 2. Use composition of functions to verify that these are actually inverses of each other. So over here, they would like us to plug g in place of f. So instead of 4x minus 12, it's 4 times this stuff plus 12. So the point of this is to show it, so don't be skipping steps. I know the arithmetic's fairly easy to do in your head, but you need to write these steps down. You could distribute the 4, undo the plus 12 with the minus 12, and simplifies the x like it's supposed to. You've got to go both directions though. You also have to show x plugged into g becomes 1/4 times all of this stuff plus 3, and then show that it simplifies to x. Distribute your 1/4 and then combine your minus 3 with your plus 3. That's what I would be looking for there. Okay, question 3. There's a lot of possible answers here, so there's a good chance you came up with something that works. That is not what I'm going to put down. But for part B, to be 1-to-1 means it passes the vertical line test and the horizontal line test. So whatever you put down, as long as it does that, that would be fine. I would just do something super easy. That passes vertical and horizontal line test, so it's 1-to-1. You don't have to try to make it more complicated than that. To not be 1-to-1, it needs to, well, first off, this is a little tricky. This says it's a function, which means it has to pass the vertical line test. But to not be 1-to-1, it either has to fail the vertical or horizontal. So I need it to pass the vertical line test, but fail the horizontal line test. And an easy example of that would be something like x squared. X squared is a function because it passes the vertical line test, but since it does not pass the horizontal line test, it's not 1-to-1. Again, this is not the answer you have to have. There's a million possible correct answers here. Anything that passed the vertical line test but not the horizontal line test would be fine. Okay, I think yours has this taken off because you shouldn't have this as a clue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I've always hated that that was on there, so I remembered to take it off this year. You need to know how to be able to find the inverse of something. So, just like question 1, it's really the same idea, just a different way to think of it. Question 1, we swapped x and y to get some new points. So if you want to find the inverse, you're swapping x and y. And then we just want to make this, we want to solve this for y equals. We always want it to be in y equals so that we know what the function looks like. So undo the -1 with the +1, undo the square with the square root, and just to be mathematically correct, we shouldn't call this y and this y because they're not the same thing. So if this is f of x, this is the inverse of f of x. You really should write it like that. Try not to say y equals. Okay, now, just a suggestion, you don't have to do this, but this is one where, you look at this, you may not feel confident or unconfident either way about your answer here. So just remember that if you're willing to do it graphically as well, this quiz will be no calculator, but you should really know what this looks like. It's x squared minus 1, but they say only keep the part where x is equal to 0 or greater than 0. So this is f of x. If you're willing to also graph this, this would look like the square root of x shifted left 1. If you're willing to do that extra step, then you've got a visual that gives you an idea if you're correct or not. Because if those are really inverses of each other, y equals x should be a line of symmetry, and they do look like a line of symmetry. So one way that you could check and feel a little better about your answer. Oh, they want us to go a little bit further here. Write a t-chart for f of x. So if I plugged in 0, 0 squared minus 1 would be negative 1. If I plugged in 1, 1 squared minus 1 would be 0. And if I plugged in 2, 2 squared minus 1 would be 3. I guess a second way that you could kind of use this to your advantage, again, I'm not quite sure why they put this on this worksheet. I didn't have anything to do with making this one. But if you understand question 1 on this worksheet and how points relate to each other, you could make yourself say, well, if this is a point on the function, this should be a point on the inverse, and this, and this. And then if you're willing to plug those into your answer to the first part, that might help you catch some mistakes. If I plug in negative 1, I get 0. If I plug in 0, I get 1. If I plug in 3, I get 2. If any of that was not true, then I would know that something was wrong with this. Okay, this part, I don't know that this came up a lot in the book assignment, but I know it came up last semester, and I know it came up in the vocab of your book assignment. But when we're talking about this function, this is my f of x, they say to only keep this part. So if I asked you to state the domain and range of this, the range would be negative 1 to infinity, and the domain is what they're telling you it is, this restricted domain. Well, if this is true about a function, you should know something about his inverse as well, because inverse just means you swap x and y. So if domain means possible x's, you switch x and y, now that represents possible y's. If range means possible y's and you switch x and y, now it represents possible x's. Again, inverse just means you're swapping input and output, swapping x and y. We're just looking at all the different ways that that makes sense. So that's what I would do to answer this question. The domain of the inverse of f is the same as the range of f. The easiest way to know the range of that is to try to graph it. Okay, question 5 is just like question 1, except it's using notations instead of words. So you've got points on a function, switch x and y. You've got points on the inverse. Question number 6 is probably the most missed question, so let me come back to that one at the end. Question 7 is more or less vocab. The graph of a function, if it's a function, it must pass the vertical line test. If the graph of a function passes a horizontal line test, then that means his inverse is a function. And if it passes both of those, it is called one-to-one. Easy test to apply, but if you don't know what you're finding when you apply those, then they don't do a lot of good. Okay, So question 6. This is one that typically students just give up a little bit too quick on, but this says it's an odd function. So let me remind you real quick some characteristics about even and odd functions. It's been a while since we've talked about those. But even functions, like x squared is a good example of that. X squared is one that people often just memorize as an even function. Is symmetric to the y-axis, whereas odd functions like x cubed are symmetric to the origin, which means you could rotate your graph 180 degrees, turn your paper upside down, same thing, and it still looks the same. So we have to think of, in this question, an odd function, so something that has this type of symmetry that does not have an inverse function. So in other words, it has to fail the horizontal line test. So if you try something like x cubed is odd, but he does have an inverse function. He does pass the horizontal line test. And if you give up too quickly, you're going to think that it's not possible. But I can make this symmetric to the origin if I just make this dip down a little bit. So on the other side, it's going to dip up a little bit. This is symmetric to the origin, which means it's an odd function, and he doesn't pass the horizontal line test, which means his inverse is not a function. So there are odd functions that don't have an inverse. But you had to find something that failed horizontal line test that was symmetric to the origin. And if you didn't stick with it long enough, you probably thought it wasn't possible. Okay, so that was just a quick overview of all of it, but of course I'd be happy to dig a little bit deeper on any of it or explain any of it a second time if it would help. This is pretty close to what your quiz will look like on Monday, but I would also review any questions you struggled with in the book assignment, and it wouldn't hurt to scan the notes a second time sometime between now and Monday as well. So, is there anything from your practice quiz here that you guys want to ask further about? Okay, if you change your mind, just let me know. Again, 86 needs to be turned in before you guys leave. So if somehow you didn't finish it last class, which I think would have been pretty hard to do, I didn't tell you had to do it for homework, so you need to use your class time now to make sure you've got that finished and turned in. If I don't have it by the end of class, it will be late. I would also like you to turn in 87, but you can turn that in anytime between now and the start of the quiz on Monday. Of course, you have it done, so I don't know why you would wait, but it won't be late until after we start the quiz. And as I said, usually we do all of section 1.9 in one day and then quiz it the second day, but since it wasn't planned that way this year, it's just spaced out a little bit better for you guys. So you got quite a bit of time here, so make sure you finish that up, and then if you have something to work on for another class, then please do so that you're being productive.